Today I'm here to talk to you about living in a green home. So here's, first of all, let me ask, how many of you live in a green home right now? Nobody, okay. Half a green home? A half green home, okay. Well, so you're here to learn about what it's going to be like when you move up to that green home, right? And Serenbe is full of green homes. All the homes here at Serenbe are certified in the Earthcraft House Green Building Program. Many of them are certified as Energy Star new homes, and there are a lot of features of these homes that you don't find in a normal home. One of the biggest is airtightness. We'll talk some about airtightness and that whole issue and how that's different in a green home. And we'll get into some of the other technologies and some of the stuff you see in here, the ground source heat pumps, also called geothermal heat pumps, and heat pump water heaters. Some really cool stuff out there. But one thing I always like to tell people is that green building it's not about the products as much as it's about the process. Yes, we need good products in green homes and green buildings, but it's how we put it all together that makes it a green home. So let me tell you a little bit more about me. I've done a lot of different things. I have a PhD in physics. Before I went to grad school, I was a high school teacher. I taught high school for 3 years, mostly physics, but also some chemistry and earth science and physical science. And after grad school, I taught at the college level for 6 years, and that's what brought me to Georgia. I was teaching in Carrollton, not very far from here, at the University of West Georgia in the physics department. And left that job in 2004 after building a green home myself that I lived in for 3 years. That's me working on it right there. And after I left academia, I did some work on houses. I started a business, not this business, another business, where I was doing home energy ratings and HVAC load calculations and home performance contracting. So I was going into existing homes and fixing them, sealing up the attics and insulating and sealing up the ducts and doing things like that, encapsulating crawl spaces. Now in the last 5 years I've had my new company, Energy Vanguard. In between I did a couple other things. I worked for another contractor and I also worked for the South Face Energy Institute. Anybody in here familiar with South Face? Okay. South Face is a great organization, nonprofit in Midtown Atlanta. Been around since the 70s, over 30 years now. And South Face is responsible for a lot of the green building that you see, not only in the Atlanta area, not only in Georgia, but in the entire Southeast. And there are people who have gone through South Face as interns, as employees, and who have left and gone out, and they are all over the place. They're not just in the Southeast, they're everywhere. South Face has a wide influence in this field. And if you look at statistics for things like how many LEED certified buildings there are in particular states, Georgia is way up there. Also, our energy code is way better than a lot of states because mainly of South Face. So South Face is a great organization. So I worked at South Face. Now my new company, I do training. That's me teaching a class in Toronto last year, or a couple years ago. I do a lot of speaking, sometimes in the Atlanta area, even though there's that rule, you have to be from somewhere else to be an expert. Occasionally I do get to speak in the Atlanta area, but I do fly a lot too. And as I said, I actually built and lived in a green home. It was just outside of Carrollton on 66 acres of land, and this is what it looked like when it was done. The house was built out of these things. Anybody know what those are? They're called structural insulated panels. It is OSB. Anybody know what OSB is? Oriented strand board. It's the flaky plywood. And so 2 sheets of OSB with styrofoam in the middle. Expanded polystyrene insulation. When this thing goes together, it's a very airtight house, very well insulated house. And so all of our exterior walls and the roof were built out of those panels. Mm-hmm.
Those things go in between the studs?
No, the studs go in between them. It's a different way of building. It's not a regular stick-built house with regular framing. These are the structure. They're structural insulated panels, and they're generally 4 feet wide. There are different ways to connect them. The method we used was with 2x-dimensional lumber. So every 4 feet we had a stud, instead of every 16 inches like you have in a typical house. So there's less thermal bridging, and it was a very airtight house, very comfortable as a result. One of the things that you don't even know until you move into a house like this is how uncomfortable the inside of the house is because of something called mean radiant temperature. Does anybody know what that term means? Mean radiant temperature is mean refers to average there. So it's the average temperature that you feel in the space. Like in here, there is a mean radiant temperature that we feel. And that is the average of the temperature of the floor. Because the floor is radiating heat, we're radiating heat. The net heat flow there determines how much we lose or gain heat to that surface. And the walls have a temperature, the ceiling has a temperature. In a high performance building, in a green building, the floors, the walls, the ceilings all have temperatures closer to the inside, a lot closer to the inside than in a typical house. Like if you live in an old house, anybody live in an old house with no insulation in the walls? In the wintertime, you might have a furnace that can blast heat in there, and if you're close to the vent, you feel okay. And sometimes overall in the house, it depends on the distribution, you might feel fine. But as soon as that furnace goes off, you notice how you feel cold immediately in an old house? That's the mean radiant temperature. The temperatures of those walls and the floor and the ceilings will just suck the heat out of you. So in a green home, you feel a lot more comfortable even at lower air temperatures. So in this house, we generally in the wintertime kept the heat at about 65, and we were perfectly fine with that temperature because the walls and the floors and the ceilings were a lot warmer than they would be in a normal house. So something to look forward to. All right, and let's see. This was a green home. We had a gray water system in the backyard. So the wastewater from the sinks went to the backyard, and we had 4 trees planted in the middle of each of these mulch basins. And that was a really good way to get rid of the wastewater. We had a composting toilet, which freaked some people out. But it's a great way to get rid of the waste rather than just putting it in a septic tank and then having that sucked out every few years, or sending it into a sewer system where it goes to a big municipal waste treatment plant and maybe ends up in the Chattahoochee sometimes. So I did live in a green home. I built it on the power of pure self-delusion. It took 2 years to build the house, and for 2 years, I was always just 2 months from being finished. That 2 months kept just moving out. So it was self-delusion, I say, that powered my being able to build that house. It was a great experience. I learned a lot from it, and it's what is responsible for me being here now, because that launched me into this new career. I did a whole lot of learning. I had never built anything bigger than a bookcase before. I had a big interest in science, of course, with a PhD in physics, and a big interest in energy efficiency and environmental impacts of the way we live. But I didn't know anything really about this stuff until I built that house. And it launched me into this whole new career. So let's ask the question, what is a green home? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Off-grid? Off-grid. Off-grid could be a green home. Green home has a lot of different definitions. Off-the-grid home would almost certainly be a green home. It doesn't necessarily have to be a green home, but it could be. What else? Small carbon footprint. That's a good one. When we use the word green, we're normally referring to environmental impacts of things. So carbon footprint, what else? And an off-grid house would have a reduced carbon footprint as well. Anything else comes to mind with green?
The construction materials themselves are renewable resources.
Looking at what kind of materials you use. Are they made from good materials? Another one would be how far away do they come from? Are they shipped all the way from China, or do they come from 20 miles away? So in the LEED green building system, they give points for how far away the materials come from. And if you get them from within a certain distance, then you get extra points in your LEED certification. So green generally refers to environmental impact, but there's some confusion sometimes with these terms, green and energy efficient and high performance and net zero, and off-grid would be another one I could have thrown in there. There are a lot of terms out there, and I think one of the other speakers probably covered some of this stuff about what is a green home and what goes into it. A green home might be interested in using materials with recycled content, whereas if you're only interested in energy efficiency, you might not care about how much recycled content. Some people don't believe in global warming, and so they don't care about carbon footprint. And so energy efficient might be the way to go. Joe Stiebrick, anybody know who Joe Stiebrick is? He is probably the most famous building scientist in North America, and he's one of the most knowledgeable people in the field as well. He doesn't believe in global warming. He's a big advocate for energy efficiency, though. His house has tons of insulation in it, it's very airtight, and has all the great stuff in it, but he doesn't care about global warming because he doesn't believe in it. Anyway, so energy efficient has to do with energy efficiency. High performance, what does that mean for a home? That's something that results from doing all these things you need to get an energy efficient or green home, especially the energy efficient home. When you build a home right, you make it airtight, you get the heating and cooling system done right with a distribution system that delivers the air properly and doesn't leak into unconditioned spaces like attics. And you don't suck in bad air from the garage and poison yourself or have backdrafting from a natural draft water heater. Then we say that's a high performance home because it's performing like it should be. A high performance home is probably also going to be an energy efficient home. And an energy efficient home is certainly green to some extent, maybe not to the extent that the LEED program or the Earthcraft House program would require, but if you look at the rating systems for Earthcraft House, for LEED, for the National Association of Home Builders Green Building Program, energy is usually the biggest category that you can get points from. Sometimes it's more than half of the points come from energy efficiency. So energy efficiency is definitely green. And net zero means that you've got some way of generating energy on the site, and usually it's electricity, and usually it's with photovoltaic panels, and there's some on the back of this building, and we've got some sitting right there. Photovoltaics collect sunlight and turn it into electricity, because a lot of the stuff that we do in homes runs on electricity. If you collect enough electricity, you can offset the total amount of electricity that you use over a year. And that would be net zero. That's the simplified version. When you get into the definition, it's actually a little trickier because you can compare that different ways. You can look at that on the basis of costs. And as a homeowner, that's probably what you would do. You would look at, am I getting paid by the utility the same amount that I'm paying them for electricity? Do I pay a net of zero each year on average for that home? That would be net zero based on cost. You could also look at it based on kilowatt hours, the actual energy balance. And when you look at the energy balance, then it's site energy versus source energy.